Winfield 25, Bob Morris on pole, and sharing the front row is Garth Wigston. Alan Grice has chosen the outside of the second row. He could have started from the inside. Charlie O'Brien, in fact, has the inside of the second row. Behind them will be Gary Cook and Gary Rogers. Flag will drop in just a second or two, and away they go from the outside. It looks as though Wigston got the jump. Wigston first up the hill. Charlie O'Brien in the middle of those three cars is second through. A little bit of a touch, and O'Brien's gone wide, almost off the track back again. What a jumble of cars as they hit the S's for the first time, but Wigston has jumped clear of the field. Morris has come through at a second, and a mass shot there in the middle of the S's. Cars everywhere. There are only 4 still mobile. We'll see how many get back on again. Looks as though Grice will. And what a sensational start to heat 1 of the Winfield 25s. They've travelled no more than about 250 metres as we pick up Alan Grice trailing the field.
Alan Grice is now trying to make up a lot of lost ground, but at this stage it's Garth Wigston who's established a good lead in the first lap of this 8-lap first heat of the Winfield 25s. He's now coming over the hump and down into the braking area at the end of the main straight. Bob Morris, who started very slowly in that race and jumped over the curb in the forced corner, is catching up to Garth Wigston as they come at the end of the main straight, with third position being held by Gary Rogers. These drivers have a big break on the remainder of the field by virtue of that incident which occurred in the S's on the first lap, and it now means that the Falcons of Jim Keogh and Murray Carter are sitting in the middle of the field, but Garth Wigston, with Bob Morris much closer to him now as they go down through the S's on the second lap, has Gary Rogers in third position.
Looks as though it's a 2-car battle, and Bob Rogers again jumping over the inside curb as he looks for an outside pass at a peculiar line there. This is a slight uphill run to a semi-blind left-hand dip. Garth Wigston of Tasmania leading by a couple of lengths to Bob Morris, and Gary Rogers a long way back in third place. Here's the battle. It's up front. Wigston and Bob Morris. Bob Morris tucked in behind, looking for a tow down the long back straight, but he doesn't appear to have the legs. Now he pulls to the inside. A braking battle going on. He has the line if he can hold that for a little bit longer, and Bob Morris comes up on the inside of Garth Wigston, jumps over the inside, which of course has forced O'Brien a little bit wide. Good driving, a little bit of gamesmanship thrown in, and as they finish their second lap, it's still a very, very determined Garth Wigston trailing Bob Morris. Don't give up Garth Wigston at the moment. He still has a big chance of pulling back Bob Morris, but the race order after 2 laps is Bob Morris, Garth Wigston and Gary Rogers.
At this stage, Bob Morris is able to open out slightly coming out of the S's, but there's some smoke coming from his car, but I think possibly it's only tyre smoke because of the very severe application of power to enable him to get quickly up the hill. As he goes through the top of the hill and down the back straight, he's clearing out slightly on Garth Wigston, but possibly this may be a move on the part of Garth Wigston to enable him to come very quickly through the corner onto the main straight. We can just see the front of his car coming into the corner, and possibly something may happen as the cars come down into the braking area at the end of the main straight.
Well, Bob Morris is driving, suffering from a very, very heavy dose of flu. He's not feeling particularly well. In fact, has virtually lost his voice. So if he does end up winning the Winfield 25 feature point score today, he might be in a bit of a spot to try and act out the part at the victory ceremony. But this is only the first heat. He's still in the lead, and another little puff of smoke coming from the back of the number 7 A9X Tirana as Wigston trails Bob Morris in second position.
In this first heat of the Winfield 25 series, then this is to be the lap in which he is to do it. He seems, though, to have been so far behind that he's not able to really take advantage of his second position. Gary Rogers has been sitting comfortably in third position. He has not lost a great deal of ground to the leaders, and he's well ahead of the man who's in fourth position. He's been driving his car quite reservedly, which is somewhat unlike the very forceful driving that we usually see from Gary Rogers, and fourth position at this stage is held by Murray Carter, driving his Falcon. Fifth position is Alan Grice, who's recovered from that debacle in the first lap, and he may be able to overtake in the last lap. As Bob Morris comes down to the end of the main straight, he's heading towards the finishing flag.
Bob Morris through the sweeper for the last time, a determined Garth Wigston behind him, but it'll be Bob Morris who gets the checkered flag, only a few lengths ahead of Garth Wigston, who put everything into a last lap effort to make up the leeway. As first and second, in third place Gary Cook, and in fourth position will be Murray Carter, and that's how they finished in heat 1 of the Winfield 25. Bob Morris, a good winner from Garth Wigston. In third place Gary Rogers, in fourth place Murray Carter. Let's look at that incident again from another angle as the drivers turn hard right. A lot of jostling there between Alan Grice and Charlie O'Brien. Grice comes up in the middle of those three cars. Watch he and Charlie O'Brien touch. The green car is O'Brien. Grice goes right. O'Brien goes straight ahead off the track with a dreadful thump that has done no good at all to the front suspension. Alan Grice, having spun backwards off the track, has one quick look out the back door to make sure he still has four wheels, and ever so gingerly sets off to rejoin the race.
The drivers are adjusting the revs, they're into gear, and they're ready to go as the flag falls. The flag is down now, and Jim Keogh goes very well away from the grid. Alan Grice pulls up closer to him as they go towards the first corner, and in fact uses that clear section of road to get through and into the lead as they go through the first corner and then duck down into the S's on the first occasion.
Gary Cook definitely clipped Alan Grice, and Grice has been hit again actually as Wigston went through, so from the lead Grice has dipped back to the rear of the field. Now Gary Cook, most certainly pushing his way through, came into contact with the Grice car, and Gary Cook in the Citizen Tirana number 11 leading Murray Carter through Winfield Hill with Gary Rogers in third position, and a wall of cars behind them jostling for positions as they come into the back straight for the first time.
Gary Cook having a great deal of difficulty getting through that first corner onto the main straight, and it meant that Murray Carter was able to pull up alongside him and out-drag him as they go over the hump. Under brakes at the end of the straight, it's Murray Carter who now takes the lead. Gary Cook again showing that the circuit is very slippery, as does Murray Carter, and they've got, in fact, having a great deal of trouble controlling their cars as they go through to complete the first heat. But Murray Carter in his Falcon is sitting there in first place. He's completed one of the 8 laps in this heat and has Gary Cook very close behind him, with Gary Rogers and Garth Wigston in fourth position.
So down through those, here's Gary Cook going for an inside pass on Murray Carter. Didn't quite come off. Gary Rogers in third position, and anything could happen here. There are cars drifting wide. This is mainly due to oil. Carter leading up the hill. Rogers has come through on the inside of Gary Cook. So the order is Carter, Gary Rogers, I should say, Gary Cook back in third position, then Alan Grice, then Garth Wigston, then Bob Morris in car number 7, trailing the parade as they sweep down from Winfield Hill into the back straight section of Baskerville.
The reverse grid start has really meant that these cars are running very closely together in the opening stages of the 8-lap race, with Bob Morris looking to improve his position. It's still Murray Carter in the lead, with Gary Rogers now in second position, running very closely behind the Falcon. They go now through to finish their second lap with Gary Rogers in second position, Murray Carter retaining the lead, and the others coming along not very far behind them. Gary Cook still sitting in third position, but it's Alan Grice now who's made amends. He's improved his position from the tail of the field. He's now sitting in fourth position, with Bob Morris fifth, Garth Wigston dropping away slightly, having slid very badly towards the outside edge of the road in that corner on the previous lap.
Nothing between them as they scream up the hill towards Winfield Hill. Murray Carter, car number 18, takes the drop into the left-hander first. Gary Cook, car number 12, is in... Gary Rogers, I should say, in car number 12 is in second position. Wigston's just had a lose, come back onto the circuit. Here's the order down the back straight. Murray Carter leading from Gary Rogers, that's the red car. Big long gap then to Alan Grice, who's finally got up into third position. You'll pick him up in a moment. He's come underneath Gary Cook. There's Gary Cook, number 11, chasing Grice, but Grice has just made the passing move on him, so Gricey's up to third place. The order up the hill and over the start-finish line again is Carter from Gary Rogers, Alan Grice and Gary Cook. Bob Morris next.
Falcon's proving very difficult for the other drivers to pass. Gary Rogers is looking for a way past at every corner, but he's unable to find even a gap past the veteran Murray Carter. But the other cars are certainly closing up very closely behind. Murray Carter making his Falcon very wide, but Gary Rogers being able to nip inside as they come into Winfield corner at the top of the hill. Alan Grice is now close behind the first 2 cars and could possibly throw out an overtaking manoeuvre as they come down on this, the 4th lap of the 8-lap reverse grid heat.
As Murray Carter leads down the end of the back straight, breaks for the big sweeper. Alan Grice has had more trouble in this one race than he'd normally have in about a dozen, but he's battled his way back to third position. There he is in the white car, trailing Gary Rogers and Murray Carter. The big blue Falcon up the hill. Carter leading from Rogers in the red car there. then Alan Grice, who's performed a few miracles to get back into third position after dropping back to last on the first lap. And anything could happen here. It's still not beyond Alan Grice to make up the difference, but whether he'll get past these Gary Rogers, just for starters, is a little bit hard to imagine, but he's looking for an outside pass. There's no way he can pass on the outside. He'll outbrake him, I think, and he's got him, Alan Grice, and he's, I think, another little touch. Alan Grice squeezed his way underneath Gary Rogers. He's into second place. Now he's chasing Murray Carter as Rogers tries underneath him. Had to back off at the last minute.
And Bob Morris is right on the tail of Gary Rogers, and he's looking to improve his position, but Alan Grice is now sitting in second position. Gary Rogers is third, and Bob Morris is a very close fourth position as those three Tiranas brake heavily at the end of the straight. Gary Rogers still applying plenty of pressure to Alan Grice. He's certainly not going to give up that second position easily, and Bob Morris is now in a position where a mistake by either of them would mean that he would move up in the finishing order.
Gary Rogers wild and Morris underneath him as they prepare now for the right-hander down into the S's. So Morris is up into the third, Grice is running second, and our race leader disappearing to the right, Murray Carter.
All the action at this stage, though, is for second position. There's Gary Cook, who caused some bother for other competitors in the early stages of the race. He's run off in the S's but rejoined the track apparently without damage as the battle for second position continues, with Alan Grice holding that position with Bob Morris third and Gary Rogers in fourth.
Murray Carter doing a tremendous job out in front with that big Falcon. It's a big handful on Baskerville. Grice slowly but surely is pegging him back. Whether the distance is going to beat him, I don't know. Morris is about the same gap back behind Alan Grice. There are the first four cars. The order is Carter, Alan Grice, Bob Morris, and Gary Rogers. 1, 2, 3, 4 as they flash across the line now, up the hill into that very, very fast right-hander. Straighten themselves out and prepare for the drop down through the S's, and they're really close. Carter leading from Grice, and Bob Rogers looking good and sitting pretty in third position.
Murray Carter certainly doing a fine job and driving his Falcon very well to hold the lead for the first 6 laps of this 8-lap race. The Tiranas are able to make impressions on him at various stages of the circuit. Alan Grice is the main danger for his lead at this stage. Alan Grice is much closer behind him as they go down the main straight, but Murray Carter seems to have sorted out the corner onto the main straight very well and drives smoothly around there, with Alan Grice firmly slotted in his slipstream at this stage and possibly readying himself for an overtaking manoeuvre under brakes the way it comes there. Draws up alongside the back bumper bar of the Falcon, but isn't able to get through, and Murray Carter certainly keeps his car well in hand, throwing it through the corner, doing a fine job despite the size of the Falcon and the smallness of the Baskerville circuit. And as they go into the last lap, it's still Murray Carter in the lead.
Let's follow this last lap where anything could happen. Grice looking for an inside pass on Murray Carter. Carter in number 18, Alan Grice in number 6, right behind, then Bob Morris in number 7, the red car driven by Gary Rogers. Grice will do anything here. He's now, I think he's looking for a pass on the inside as they go up to Winfield Hill, but the distance will beat him. They're under brake, so he can't do anything there. So the passing move, I think you'll find, will be at the end of the back straight. And Bob Morris probably a little bit too far back to get into a situation where he could consider himself a winner. This is the moment of truth. Down the back straight for the last time. Murray Carter, car 18, hotly pursued by Alan Grice in car 6. Carter, I think, is going to get to the corner first, but Grice, in a last desperate effort, has lost it, and he's gone sideways off the track. Lost that battle under brakes. Bob Morris slipped through at a second. Grice has picked up that car as if by magic. He's come back onto the circuit. Naturally enough, Gary Rogers has gone past. Our winner has crossed over the line. Murray Carter first, Bob Morris second, Gary Rogers third, and Alan Grice comes around disappointed but probably lucky to be in one piece. That was a pretty dodgy little part of the track to lose the car, to cross the line in 4th place. With 10 to go. So the 9 laps and they're off, and Keogh goes sideways at the back of the field. Fortunately, Miss Carter. Morris jumps out first. He leads into turn number 1. Wigston goes round the outside. Grice back in 4th position. Behind Charlie O'Brien, Gary Cook has come up on the Gary Rogers has come up on the inside of Grice, pushed him back a position or two as they stream out of the S's for the first time, and fortunately this time they all got around without incident. It's Morris leading Wigston up the hill, and it'll be interesting now to see whether Morris is catchable or not. Keogh's lost it, car number 4, that was at the bottom of the run up the hill. He'll rejoin the race, I think. There goes Gary Cook in number 11 ahead of Murray Carter. And they're streaming now down the back straight for the first time.
Bob Morris has established himself in the lead with a lot of pressure coming from Garth Wigston. We could see how carefully Alan Grice took that first first lap. He's now sitting back in 5th position. Bob Morris in 1st position, driving very, very hard in his Tirana. A most determined driver. Garth Wigston equally determined in front of his home crowd. He's sitting very closely in 2nd position there and has lost very little ground to Bob Morris in that opening lap. Charlie O'Brien with Gary Rogers, Alan Grice, Gary Cook and Murray Carter following along behind them. So from 1st back to 7th position is only a distance of about 100 yards.
A little bit of smoke coming out of the back on just under a hard acceleration and braking. Perhaps it is braking, we don't know, of the Morris car. Here it is, through Winfield Hill for the first time. This fast downhill run towards the back straight. Morris clearing out just a little bit more from Garth Wigston, then Charlie O'Brien, and then Gary Rogers in 4th position, and Grice sitting back in 5th. There goes number 12, Gary Rogers. We pick up our race leader again, Bob Morris, at the end of the back straight. Sets it up beautifully and drifts. You see the smoke coming out the back of the car, but that was apparent in the first 2 heats today, so obviously it's nothing too dramatic. Gary Cook around the outside of Murray Carter in number 18. Carter, I think, who won the 2nd heat, having a few problems in this one.
Murray Carter started further down the grid than he did in the 2nd heat, and he's found traffic quite a problem because the very big Falcon is a handful around the Baskerville circuit. Gary Cook seems to be coping quite well, driving without a clutch in this heat. His car is somewhat tidier than it was in the middle heat, and probably he's come to grips with his gearbox situation.
Back in 3rd place still is Charlie O'Brien. You see the angles and the antics of the cars as they go on this uphill right hand and then dip down into the S's. Must keep a close watch on that Morris car and just make sure that he's not having any major problems. Alan Grice could be the driver to watch a little bit later on. The car is a little bit battered, but there's nothing mechanically wrong with it at all. And if he's playing a waiting game, there he is right of screen. I think he might be back a little bit too far. He has a few cars to pass and a lot of distance to make up on the race leader, Bob Morris.
Charlie O'Brien and Gary Rogers in front of him, but it's still Bob Morris very firmly in the lead, again with the smoke coming from the rear of his car. It doesn't seem to be worsening. I wonder whether there's some bodywork rubbing on a tyre on Bob Morris's car. Perhaps he's changed tyres for this final heat, because the smoke problem does seem to be worse than it was in previous heats. Garth Wigston sliding his car there through the first corner past the pits, heading along the section towards the very difficult downhill S section. Charlie O'Brien showing some of the pressure that he's receiving from Gary Rogers and Alan Grice by sliding his car around on the circuit. Gary Rogers also getting a little bit crossed up as he lines up to go up the hill, and possibly this gives Alan Grice some heart, and we may see an overtaking manoeuvre from him in this 5th and middle lap of the race.
Let's watch here's the pack charging along behind. There's Gary Rogers going for an inside pass on Charlie O'Brien, but he's left his run a little bit too late. Bounces through the dirt. Right behind them is Alan Grice, and Grice is now getting a bit desperate, almost a touch there as they come into the finish straight between Charlie O'Brien and Gary Rogers as Grice swings around the outside. He's got the line to the next corner, bounces over the inside ribble strip. He's passed one car in what could be now his dramatic run to the finish, but there's the gap between the first 5 cars. Not that much now, because the cars running in 3rd, 4th and 5th, Charlie O'Brien, Alan Grice and Gary Rogers, now starting to close, it appears, just a fraction on Garth Wigston, but they have a long, long way to go.
Gary Rogers isn't going to give up his 4th position easily. He's nipping inside Alan Grice at the top of the hill, but Gricey, by virtue of his better line, is able to open out as they go down the top straight. Coming through now, Charlie O'Brien using all the road in his car, and probably at the end of the straight we may see another overtaking manoeuvre from Alan Grice, but still in the lead it's Bob Morris driving his car very rapidly with his inside wheel locked right up is Alan Grice in his car. He goes across the apex and back onto the circuit into the path of Charlie O'Brien. Charlie wasn't able to miss that incident, and so it's meant that Alan Grice's Craven Mile Tirana is certainly a vastly different shape, with fire underneath it, probably from Alan attempting to restart that car. The cars behind were able to thread their way through. They included Gary Cook and Murray Carter here towards the rear of the field, but that has meant really that Alan Grice's race is run, and now we're following the rearmost cars in the race. Gary Cook in his Citizen Watches Tirana, and Murray Carter in the Brian Wood Ford Falcon. There's Alan Grice. He's out of his car, and you can see the damaged condition of that car as the leader, Bob Morris, comes down the main straight.
Well, the Alan Grice camp as we pick up Bob Morris. We did have Bob Morris. Here he is again at the end of the long back straight, passing the rather dilapidated Alan Grice Tirana. A lot of work coming up for the Alan Grice mechanics, because the car has been given the old short back and sides treatment in every race today, and that one really did it. He's probably done little more than a little bit of front end damage and a sprung bonnet and whatever, and possibly a radiator. He didn't hit all that hard, but still a lot of work to be done on that car. There's Murray Carter and Gary Cook continuing their battle near the rear of the field, with rather slightly dilapidated field now, of course, and back to our race leader, Bob Morris, who's doing everything right. He's picking all the right lines, and he's opened up a big gap between himself and Garth Wigston.
There's Bob Morris, though, now increased his lead again slightly over Garth Wigston. He's driving somewhat more reservedly than he was earlier on. Gary Cook and Murray Carter in third position, coming down towards the cars of Alan Grice on the inside of the circuit, and Charlie O'Brien stationary on the outside of the circuit there.
Well, bad luck for Charlie. Both Charlie and Alan Grice have had rather terrible days today. They've bent the cars and gone off, and all sorts of things have happened to them. But we pick up Bob Morris again, still the race leader in the final and deciding heat of Winfield 25s. Not that much still between he and Garth Wigston. Morris leading up the hill towards Winfield Hill, and as we say, that's quite a dip to the left and downhill all the way now for probably the best part of 3/4 of a mile. I wonder, sorry, Stephen Buddingham, whether that gap is starting to lessen between Morris and Wigston.
I was just going to say, it looks as though Garth Wigston stepped up the pace, but maybe he's left his run a little bit late, because they're in fact on the 9th and final lap of this race. There's been so much excitement that the race has gone by very quickly, and now it looks as though the gap is just too much for Garth Wigston to make up. Although he leaves his braking late, he hangs the tail out as he comes through the final corner, but although he closes up towards the rear of Bob Morris's car, he's not able to get his bumper bar in front, so victory goes to Bob Morris, with a very close second position being Garth Wigston. Coming round now for third position is Gary Cook, driving without a clutch in his car. Fourth place is Murray Carter. You see there probably a very exhausted Gary Cook, hanging his hand out the window as a signal to Murray Carter that he's slowing up, and Bob Morris and Garth Wigston going around in very close company, but considerably slower than they have done for the last 9 journeys around the Baskerville circuit. That, of course, by my calculations, would mean that Bob Morris would end up as a very firm winner of the Winfield 25s feature, Jim. Here we are. There's Alan Grice across the apex of the corner and back onto the circuit in the path of Charlie O'Brien, who was left with nowhere to go. The car of Gary Rogers was slowed up dramatically by that incident, and that allowed Gary Cook and Murray Carter to close up close behind.